the Chants started attending Open Way about a year and a half ago. Is that about right? Kind of like Advent a couple years ago, I remember. And Stephanie and her family moved from California up here to Vancouver at that point, and maybe a little before that. Stephanie is a passionate activist, a mom of 3 rad kids who are all around somewhere. I also know Stephanie is a lover of puzzles because she has shared some with me, which I'm grateful for, and of French fries and of ramen and bubble tea. I saw you just went to a bubble tea festival, is that right?
Yeah,
it was disappointing, sadly. And before having, here's a little tidbit, before having kids, Stephanie had a pet snake who actually made it into the wedding photos of Evan and Stephanie. So that is something maybe she will tell us more about soon. But thank you for agreeing to be a first-time preacher here, Stephanie. We're excited to hear from you. I'm gonna just try to set up this mic a little better.
Hold a step. Okay, does that feel okay?
Yeah,
that's good. Okay, awesome.
Thank you, everyone. I'll be speaking on Isaiah 58. The book of Isaiah is the first of the major prophet books in the Old Testament. Chapter 58 is part of the second or third section of the book, and interestingly, most likely not written by Isaiah. It was written for the Israelites returning to Jerusalem post-exile from Babylon, and the chapter kind of focuses more on restoration versus earlier parts of the book that focus more on judgment. So Isaiah himself was a prophet, he was a priest, a statesman. He lived during the last years of the northern kingdom and during the reigns of 4 kings of Judah: King Uzziah or Azariah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. Isaiah also lived during the same period as some other minor prophets, Amos, Hosea, and Micah. There's also books named after them. Those prophets also wrote about similar themes of social justice. Isaiah influenced both the everyday common Israelite as well as kings and leaders of Israel, and is often thought to have influenced the course of Judah's history throughout his many prophecies and oracles, including warnings of destruction and judgment, but also including those of hope and promise of blessings. So I think, Jordan, you're going to read the chapter for me.
Here we go. So Isaiah 58. Shout out, do not hold back. Lift up your voice like a trumpet. Announce to my people their rebellion, to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet day after day they seek me and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that practiced righteousness and did not forsake their ordinance of their God. They ask of me righteous judgments. They want God on their side. Why do we fast, but you do not see? Why humble ourselves, but you do not notice? Look, you serve your own interest on your fast day and oppress all your workers. You fast only to quarrel and to fight and to strike with a wicked fist. Such fasting as you do today will not make your voice heard on high. Is such the fast that I choose, a day to humble oneself? Is it to bow down the head like a bulrush and to lie in sackcloth and ashes? Will you call this a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? This is not the fast that I choose. This to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the straps of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free and break every yoke. Is it not to share your bread with the hungry of many generations and bring the homeless poor into your house when you see the naked to cover them and not to hide yourself from your own kin? Then your light shall break forth like the dawn and your healing shall spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help and he will say, here I am. If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness, and your gloom be like the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your needs in parched places and make your bones strong. and you shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters never fail. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall rise up the foundations if you honor it. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in. If you refrain from trampling the Sabbath, from pursuing your own interests on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight and the holy day of the Lord honorable, not going in your own ways, serving your own interests, or pursuing your own affairs, then you shall take delight in the Lord, and I will make you ride upon the heights of the earth. I will feed you with the heritage of your ancestor Jacob, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks, Brennan. Okay, first I just want to say thank you, Pastor Pat and Open Way, for giving me this chance to preach. It was super bad timing because our family just got over COVID and then we went on this big road trip. But I really wanted to preach on this passage, so that's why I said yes. Some years ago, I bought myself these rings as a Valentine's present from Evan. One of them says, do justice. The other one says, love mercy. And then the third one says, walk humbly. So social justice is kind of my thing, it's my passion. And I just feel like it's really integral to Jesus and the gospel, so that's why. So the people of Israel thought that they were doing all the right things. They thought they were fasting and doing Sabbath exactly how they were taught, and it was God's problem for not responding to them. In the first part of verse 3, we see that Israel is genuinely confused. They think that they're doing what they're supposed to, so why isn't God hearing them? But Isaiah brings them a totally new word from God. He basically redefines for them everything that they think they're supposed to be doing and challenges the very foundations of their faith. There are a lot of command or action words here in verses 6 and 7, and I'm going to read them from a slightly different translation. Isaiah tells them that they're supposed to break the chains of injustice, to get rid of exploitation in the workplace, to free the oppressed, to cancel debts, to share food with the hungry, to invite the homeless poor into your homes, to put clothes on the shivering ill-clad, and to be true to your own family. These are very much like action. These aren't passive things that Isaiah is asking them to do. The recurring theme here is that God doesn't want just empty pious rituals, but rather God wants ongoing, recurring generosity. God wants justice, and God wants equity. God's asking Israel to get rid of their previous assumptions of religious responsibility. God wants more focus on inward attitude and community. God wants us to change how we interact with others in our community. If we see someone hungry, homeless, in rags, hurting, oppressed, we're supposed to do something, anything. Our last church in California banded together with a few other local religious and community organizations to try to identify some local problems and come up with solutions. One of the problems that they noticed or identified was homelessness and transient populations coming through. For those of you that don't know, we lived in like the mountain. Most people think of California as really sunny, but we lived like up in the mountains, so it was more like a Whistler type area, so very snowy in the winter. So obviously this would be a really big problem for people who don't have a house to live in with big snowstorms and all of that. So they came up with the idea for this emergency warming center. Emergency because we didn't have the means to do it like as a full-time thing, but they opened it for like the coldest, stormiest nights, and it was located in our church. Now, our church did not have the biggest building in town, nor did we have the biggest congregation, but we had a space that we were willing to offer, And through our coalition, we had enough volunteers to open up the space for people on the very coldest nights of the winter, providing shelter, food, warmth to those in need. In an average winter season, the warming center could be open maybe 40 plus nights, providing a warm meal, shelter to both humans and even dogs, and sometimes families. Additionally, extra clothing, blankets, jackets, boots, toiletries were offered, and people could be connected to services and resources outside the area if they wanted. Now, my family didn't do a whole lot of direct stuff for the warming center. There were things that I wished we could have done, like volunteer hosting for the overnight shifts, making more meals. I have a lot of feelings about that I had to work through, but my kids were much younger at the time, and we were just in a different season in our lives, but we did what we could to support. I got together with another mom and kids, and we made lasagnas together, and those lasagnas, some of them went into the freezer for the warming center for later use. Some of it went to our own families for dinner that night. And I'm learning that I can't do everything that I want to do. I can't always live up to the expectations I have or the standards I want, and that's okay. I don't have to do everything perfectly, but I just need to do something. And over time, the people that we helped weren't just random homeless transient people, but they became people whose names we knew, whose stories we knew. We cared about what happened to them. We were building community with them. By doing small things consistently over time, we can make large, sweeping social change. These actions that over time can restructure relationships and power dynamics. God's desire for our new community is a whole dismantling of unjust relationships. We aren't to replace one type of power and domination for another. Instead, we should rid ourselves of our own self-satisfaction, our blame towards others, our entrenchment within power structures, entitlement, and being unaware of our privilege. It's hard, yes, and it requires regular, ongoing self-reflection. One area where I'm learning that I have a big privilege blind spot is ableism. Sometimes it seeps out in my speech, sometimes in my thoughts, and unfortunately, sometimes even in my actions. It's never intentional. Even using the phrase blind spot when I typed it, I was like, I'm not supposed to use that, but I left it in to bring that out. But I don't know what I don't know until I learn about it, whether from reading or friends or someone calling me in or out. And then hopefully I can do better next time. I'm also trying to be proactively learning, taking the burden off of people with disabilities, because it's not their responsibility to teach me. It's my responsibility to learn. I follow differently abled people on Twitter and Instagram, and I read things that people post, and just try to do what I can. So, like I said in the beginning, my family just got back from this 10-day road trip down to California. We were in the Bay Area to see my grandfather, who is about to turn 101. Yeah, amazing. While we were down there, the kids wanted to go to the Winchester Mystery House. It's probably not a big deal for our people up in Canada, but in the Bay Area, it's like this really big tourist trap sort of thing. I had never been, even though I had heard of it my whole life and lived close by to it. But it's this big house where this person, Sarah Winchester, just kept building and building and building and building. It started out as like this 8-room sort of farmhouse space, and it just turned into like rooms within rooms and hallways going nowhere, and like staircases that go nowhere that just go to like a big drop, and like, chimneys that don't connect to anything, random doors and windows. This is just weird. And people say it's haunted. But what I really thought was interesting about the house were these tiny stairs that were in a bunch of the stairwells. So apparently when Sarah Winchester got older, she developed arthritis and wasn't able to climb all the regular stairs. So part of her renovations all over the house were to install these special stairs everywhere. And each of these steps were only like a few inches in height so that she could get her foot up and go about wherever she wanted to go. But it made me wonder, why couldn't that be the standard for all the steps? Why did it have to be an adaptive thing? Sure, maybe it was more effort to install. Maybe people who didn't need them might find it cumbersome to adjust to it. But I thought there could be a lot of people who would benefit from having these, shorter stairs and find them easier to use. Even my kids said they liked the smaller steps. Jubilee said they were cute, but they also said they were just easier to walk up and down. But this isn't something that I would have noticed or considered before because of my own mobility privilege. Racism and sexism, these are isms that I'm familiar with, I know. It's part of my lived experiences. I also just want to acknowledge that I know many of us here have lived lives of being oppressed or being in the margins, whether for our race or our gender or who we love. But it doesn't negate that we could also have privilege in other areas. Even though I'm an Asian American woman, I still have the privilege of having an able body. So I really do need to work hard to see disability inequity, because if I don't see it, I can't help to change it. Verses 8 to 14 give us a series of blessings or promises that seem to be contingent on whether we do all those things from before. If you do X, then you get Y. Or on the surface, it seems kind of problematic, like health and wealth gospel, which to me was kind of icky. I kind of wanted to skip over it at first, but I felt like that might be taking the easy way out. So I tried to kind of dig in. I thought, well, it can't mean what we think it means on the surface, because God is a perfect, loving God, and even an average parent would want to help their child if their child cried out or had a need. So as I considered these verses more, I stopped thinking of them so much as if-then statements, but rather that God wants a partnership with us. God wants to see us as a restored and restorative people that can work with them. Rather than seeing these as transactional or vending machine type of statements, I realized that the blessing is actually in the community that is built up. So this was my big aha thing, so I'm going to say it again. The blessing is the community. In my earlier story of the warming center, the community that developed through the volunteers and the people that repeatedly came through our doors to use the warming center, that was actually the blessing in itself. Some years ago, in a series of perfectly timed coincidences, our family was connected with an organization called the Northern Nevada International Center. It was a local NGO that helped with refugee resettlement. And it just so happened when we contacted them that they had a new family coming in, family of 6 arriving from Afghanistan. And we were able to join their welcoming team. I later learned that our particular welcoming team was really unusual, and that usually the welcoming teams were all like one group from like a church or community or friends or something, but we were just like this random hodgepodge mix. We didn't know each other, but we all had the common interest of wanting to help and make a change. So I volunteered to cook their first meal in the US. Our family greeted them at the airport, and over the next few years, we helped them navigate social services, find English classes, we helped them move a few times, we celebrated birthdays, holidays, graduations, we navigated changing schools for the 5 kids, and we even got to go to mosque with them to celebrate the end of Ramadan. In general, it was just, we became friends and we were doing life together with them. Evan and I remarked many times to each other over the years how blessed we felt to be part of this group, not just to know the family that we were helping, but our volunteer group also. The blessing for us was the community that we had developed. When we practice daily generosity and fight injustice, we are blessed in helping to build a just and equitable community. The ancient ruins are not just rebuilt with the same tools of oppression, with different people in power, but the goal is to create something altogether new and holy and beautiful. Verse 12 says, "We raise up the foundations of many generations." I feel like that was something I really related to as a parent. As I teach my kids about how to practice daily generosity and kindness, how to be an upstander and not a bystander, I lay the foundation for this next generation and for them to teach the same and more to the next generation after them. One of my dear friends once encouraged me, telling me that parenting was hard because I was trying to do something new and different. I was forging a new way. Those of you that go hiking, you know how much easier it is to follow a trail that's already there versus when you get off trail and you're trying to bushwhack your way through. I cling to her words on especially difficult days, knowing that I won't spank my kids like what was done to me, that I need to model for them empathy and understanding, give them words to help them describe their emotions and feelings, to elevate their voices and opinions to show that they matter, to learn from them because they are amazing people who have things to share and teach me. This is completely different from the days of kids should be seen and not heard. I know I'm doing something right when my oldest oozes with confidence that I didn't have until well into adulthood. She can speak her mind to almost any adult and knows how to advocate for herself and others, while also just being a really nice and polite kid, who also corrected me when I was practicing and told me to say teen. So my hope for us at Open Way is that we can work together to build this new, equitable, and just community, coming out of the exile of pandemic and other personal hardships and trials. We can work together on daily generosity towards others, while also working to break down systems of oppression. That is how we can be the blessing of community for all those around us.
Wow.